seguridad a la indigentes. 10 segundos para que trasladen al compañero que lleva las llaves de los candados.
I was the sheriff of Red Hollow, a tiny town nestled deep in the Appalachian Mountains, for just over 20 years. We were the kind of place that didn't get cell reception unless you hiked to the fire tower, and where everyone still waved at each other from their trucks. The worst thing I usually dealt with was teens siphoning gas or the occasional domestic squabble after too many beers. That was until last winter, when we found Ernie Blake dead in his cabin. Ernie was what you'd call a mountain man, kept to himself, lived off the land, and hadn't had a phone in decades. His place sat at the end of a washed-out dirt road that even four-wheel drive hated. Nobody ever went up there unless they had a damn good reason. But when his nephew from Asheville came looking for him before Christmas and found the place silent, we took a ride up. His cabin was cold as a tomb when we forced the door. Snow drifted in from a busted window, and his woodpile had been untouched. We found him curled up in bed like he'd just laid down and never woke up. No sign of violence, no wounds, no blood. Just still. Peaceful, almost. Except for the expression on his face, not peaceful at all. It was twisted into something close to terror. I should have left it at that. Should have called it exposure or heart failure and moved on. But something didn't sit right with me. His pantry was full. Firewood stacked high. Hell, his shotgun was loaded and leaning next to the bed. Like he was expecting something. After the coroner took him, I poked around the place a little more. That's when I found it. An old, leather-bound notebook wedged behind the stove, wrapped in oilskin and sealed with twine. On the front, burned into the leather, were the words Hunter's Ledger. I didn't read it right away. I brought it back to the station and stuck it in my desk drawer. A couple days later, when the snow had let up and I had a quiet evening, I poured a glass of bourbon and opened it. The first few pages were what you'd expect: deer counts, migration notes, traps. But the farther I got, the stranger it became. Ernie had started keeping track of something he only referred to as it. December 3rd, saw it again today, watching from the ridge. Didn't move when I raised the scope. Eyes too far apart. January 12th, tracks came down to the creek last night. Three-toed, deep. No melt. It stood there for hours. February 9th, it's not an animal. I don't think it ever was. I tried sleeping during the day. Night is too loud. It knows I'm awake. The entries continued for over a decade. Always the same: sightings, footprints, uneaten bait, gutted animals left in patterns he described as wrong, like they meant something. He stopped calling it around 2014. Started calling it the Gray. There were sketches too crude, done in charcoal. Long limbs, no hair, a wide mouth, and those too far apart eyes. Always standing among trees, as if trying to blend in but never quite managing. I closed the journal and sat there for a long time. I wish I just burned the damn thing. Instead, I started checking his old trail cameras. I drove up there myself the next week. My deputy, Nate, offered to come along, but I told him no. Just a gut feeling that I needed to do it alone. There were 3 cameras around Ernie's property, and I was surprised to find them all intact, battery-powered, and still working. I brought the SD cards back and went through them at the station. For the most part, it was what you'd expect: deer, raccoons, the occasional bear. Until the final camera. At 3:17 a.m., 6 days before Ernie died, something walked past the frame. It was tall. Too tall. Bare skin. Gray like ash. It didn't walk right. The best way I can describe it is delayed. Like its joints didn't move until after the rest of the body told them to. It passed through in 2 frames, stopped briefly in the 3rd, then turned its head toward the camera. It didn't have eyes. Or maybe it did, but they weren't where they should have been. I deleted the footage. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I felt watched the second I paused it. I started noticing things around town after that. Scratches on the back door of the station. A smell like wet copper near my cruiser in the mornings. Lights flickering in the fire tower, even though the generator had been dead for years. Then came the dreams. I was standing in the forest, surrounded by trees that stretched higher than they should, and something moved between them. Not toward me, just around, like it was circling. And always that same sound. A slow, high-pitched hum, like insects in a jar. The last straw came a month later. Nate didn't show up for his shift. He lived just outside town in a trailer near the ridge. I drove out there, figuring maybe he'd overslept or had car trouble. His front door was open. Coffee still hot on the counter. TV on static. His gun belt was hanging by the door, untouched. But he was gone. No footprints in the snow leading away. No tire tracks. Just gone. That night, I drove back to Ernie's cabin. I don't know why. Some stupid idea that maybe I'd find answers there. I brought a flare gun, a flashlight, and a bottle of whiskey. The cabin was just as we'd left it, except for one thing: all the trees behind it had been stripped bare. No bark, no branches. Just tall, pale trunks stretching into the dark like matchsticks. I stepped outside and everything went silent. I mean silent. No wind, no crunch of snow, not even my own breath. Then I saw it, standing at the tree line. Tall, thin, gray, not moving. I raised the flare gun and fired. For a second, the entire forest lit up, and I saw dozens of them, all standing motionless between the trees. Some were crouched. Some were halfway up the trunks, like insects frozen mid-crawl, all watching me. The flare went out. Darkness swallowed the trees again. I ran. I don't remember getting back to my cruiser. Just the feeling of something brushing against the back of my neck as I slammed the door shut. I put in my retirement papers the next day. I never told anyone about the ledger. Not officially. Not about the footage. Not about the trees. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear that hum. And a few weeks ago, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just a single photograph inside. It showed Nate, standing in the woods. Behind him, in the distance, barely visible, were several tall, gray shapes. And between the trees, something watching from the ridge. They always say the woods are different at night, but unless you've worked the job I had, you don't really understand how different. I was sheriff of Leech Hollow County for 11 years, and I'm not exaggerating when I say the Pinewood Forest has taken more people than the river, the roads, or even our worst winters combined. But what happened last spring that changed the way I see the woods forever? It started with a prison bus. Heavy rain, washed out road. A call came in around midnight. The transport had overturned about 6 miles out from town, right where the old mining road forks off from Route 9. 3 guards, 5 inmates. By the time deputies got there, the driver was dead and 2 of the prisoners had vanished into the tree line. The guards were banged up bad but alive. We assumed it was a simple escape, desperate men running blind into the woods in the middle of a storm. God knows they wouldn't be the first. The next day, we organized a search party. Brought dogs, volunteers, even a drone team from the next county. But we didn't find them. No tracks, no clothing, no bodies. Just nothing. That should have been the end of it, an ugly story we'd quietly forget. But 3 nights later, around 2:30 in the morning, a local hunter named Travis McKee called in. Said he saw something moving through the forest near Lake Harrow. Lights, he kept saying. They're floating. And they're not flashlights. I swear to God, Sheriff, they're not flashlights. I didn't want to waste resources, not after the mess with the bus. But Travis wasn't the type to panic. Ex-Army, lived alone, never called unless it was serious. So I grabbed my coat, radioed dispatch, and drove out there myself. The lake's surrounded by dense woods and has a reputation even among locals. People fish there, but nobody camps overnight. There's something about how the fog clings to the water, like it doesn't want you to see what's underneath. I found Travis waiting near the trailhead, standing beside his truck with a rifle slung over one shoulder. His face was pale under the brim of his cap. They're still out there, he whispered. Further in now, moving slow. I stepped ahead of him onto the trail and squinted into the darkness. And that's when I saw it, just barely visible through the trees. A flicker of orange light, then another, then a third. 3 of them, swaying gently in a line, deeper in the woods. Like old lanterns, maybe kerosene. The glow was soft, unnatural, like candlelight without a source. I radioed him that I was investigating and told Travis to stay put. He didn't argue. The deeper I went, the quieter everything became. No wind, no frogs, no crunch of underbrush, even from my own boots. It was like the forest swallowed all sound. The lights moved slowly but steadily, always ahead of me, never letting me get too close. I don't know why I kept following them. Something about them felt inviting, like they wanted to be found. Like if I just pushed a little further, I'd understand. I know how that sounds. After 20 minutes, the light stopped. I came into a small clearing I'd never seen before, even though I've patrolled that forest more times than I can count. The lights hovered at the edge, completely still. That's when I saw the first body. One of the escaped inmates, Alvarez, was hanging upside down from a tree limb about 10 feet off the ground. No rope, no wire. Just suspended. His arms dangled, neck bent at an impossible angle. Eyes wide open. As I stepped forward, I noticed something else. There were symbols carved into the bark of every tree in the clearing. Circles within circles. Twisted crosses. And handprints burned into the wood like they'd been branded. Then I saw the second body. It wasn't a prisoner. It was Deputy Clay, who I'd sent out the night of the crash, but who'd radioed in hours later that he'd turned back due to rising water. Said he never made it to the site. There he was, sitting against a tree, eyes closed, mouth open, like he'd just fallen asleep. But his uniform was soaking wet, and his boots were missing. I stumbled back and raised my radio, but it crackled with nothing but static. That's when the lights moved. Not forward, up. They rose above the clearing, faster than they should have, until they were hovering directly overhead. And then they went out. The clearing was pitch black, and in the silence that followed, I heard something behind me. Not footsteps. Breathing. I turned and aimed my flashlight. Nothing. I turned again. Still nothing. And then I heard it. A voice, faint and distant, but unmistakable. "Come see," it said. I bolted. Crashed through the woods, branches whipping in my face, heart pounding like a drum. I don't remember the route I took. Just that eventually, I burst out of the trees onto the gravel road where Travis still waited. He jumped when he saw me and reached for his rifle, but lowered it once he realized it was me. "You all right?" he asked. I couldn't even speak. Just nodded and got in the cruiser. Back at the station, I didn't file a report. I told the team the search was suspended due to safety concerns. I said the prisoners were presumed dead. I said nothing about the lights. But a week later, we got another call. This time, it was a woman camping with her boyfriend up by Slate Ridge. She claimed he'd vanished during the night, and when she looked for him, she saw lanterns bobbing through the trees. When we got to her site, she was hysterical. Her boyfriend was gone, no tracks, no signs of struggle. But hanging from a tree nearby was a pair of boots. Deputy Clay's boots. I've been sheriff a long time, but I've never opened a case and felt it watching me. I've never heard names whispered in the static of the dispatch radio. I've never seen moss growing in the exact shape of a human handprint on my office wall. Until now. I don't patrol the forest at night anymore. Not because I'm afraid of what I'll find, but because I'm afraid. I'll follow the lights again, and this time, I won't come back. I don't like talking about Horse Hollow, not just because of what happened there last month, but because I was there the first time too. Back in 1993, when I was just a green 21-year-old deputy trying to prove myself. It's the kind of place the county quietly forgets, a dense stretch of woods near the northern border, about a mile wide, fenced off after a failed search and rescue. We were looking for a 12-year-old boy who went missing on a school camping trip. We found his shoe in a tree 20 feet up and his sleeping bag in a creek half a mile away, still zipped shut. We never found him, or the 3 volunteers who went in after dark trying to help. After that, they closed the forest. The families called it negligence. The papers called it a tragedy. But the older folks in town called it something else, Horse Hollow. Said the name dated back to before the Civil War, when horses would bolt into those woods and never come back. The trees are tall and packed so tight they barely let sunlight through, and the air always smells like wet iron. You just feel wrong when you're in there. I hadn't stepped foot near it in over 30 years. Not until the hikers went missing. They were college kids, 5 of them. Out-of-towners. From what I gathered, they were looking for abandoned places to explore and must have read an old blog post or something. They cut through the fence on a Sunday morning and were never seen again. By Monday, their rental car was found parked just off the access road, and someone had pried the locked gate open. The forestry signs warning "Do not enter" were shoved aside. I told myself I'd let search and rescue handle it. I even called the state team. But when I saw the footage from a trail cam hidden near the tree line, the last known image of them walking into those woods, something in me shifted. They looked like kids. Excited. Laughing. The exact opposite of how I remembered coming out of those woods in '93. So I went. Not alone. I brought Deputy Warren, my most level-headed guy. I didn't tell him everything, just that I had history with the place and wanted to make sure no amateurs messed it up. We packed light, radios, flares, sidearms, and a handheld GPS. I figured we'd go in, do a basic sweep, and head out by nightfall. I was wrong. The first thing we noticed was the silence. You'd expect birds, maybe insects, But Horse Hollow doesn't sound like a forest. It sounds like the inside of a building. Thick, still air. The kind that makes your ears ring. We followed what looked like a path for about 40 minutes before the trees started to tighten. I marked our route with red tape every 100 feet, like protocol says. The GPS didn't ping after the first half mile, but I chalked it up to bad coverage. Then we saw the crow. It was lying on the ground, wings spread wide, eyes glassy. No blood, no trauma, just dead. Warren snapped a photo, and we kept going. About 10 minutes later, we saw it again. Same position, same bird. I thought it was just another crow until Warren pointed out the tag he'd placed near it. My red tape fluttering from a nearby branch. We looped without turning, except we hadn't turned. We'd walked in a straight line. That's when Warren laughed nervously and said, "Maybe we're tired." I didn't answer. We pressed on, this time veering slightly northwest, using a compass instead of the GPS. And for a while, it worked. We came to a small ridge I vaguely remembered from '93, overlooking what should have been an old creek bed. Except now it was a pond. Stagnant water, black as tar. Floating in the middle was a bright blue backpack. Warren wanted to go around it. I agreed. But as we skirted the edge, I noticed something carved into the trunk of a pine tree. A name, etched in shaky letters. Ethan, it read. The same name as the boy we lost in '93. I told Warren we were heading back. I didn't care about the hikers anymore. Something was off. Worse than before. We turned around and followed the red tape markers. There were none. Every strip I'd tied was gone. The trail behind us looked identical to the one ahead. Same trees, same slope, same eerie silence. And then came the whisper. I know how that sounds, but both of us heard it. Clear as day. It said this way, not shouted, just softly spoken, as if someone was standing inches behind us. We turned, weapons drawn. Nothing. The forest changed after that. The trees leaned closer together. The light dimmed. My watch said 3:17 p.m., but it looked like dusk. We started to run. It wasn't a plan, it was instinct, like prey moving before a predator. Warren tripped first. I spun around to help him up, but he just stared at the ground. I asked what was wrong, and he pointed to a shape partially buried under the leaves. It was a cell phone cracked, but still blinking faintly. We recognized the lock screen photo, one of the missing hikers. Then we saw another. A sleeping bag zipped shut, soaked through, lying beside a tree. Another few steps, and there was a boot, still laced, fresh, but no bodies, no blood, just their things, discarded like old skin. Then came the noise, a rhythmic thudding, deep and slow, like footsteps from something too big to be real. They echoed from all directions, and every time we thought we were running away from them, they'd show up ahead of us. At some point, we ran straight into a clearing, the only open space we'd seen in hours. In the center was a wooden post, and nailed to it was something that shouldn't exist. It was Warren's photo from earlier. The dead crow, printed out in color, like from a home printer. Still warm to the touch. We didn't stop running after that. I don't know how we made it back. One minute we were in the middle of that maze of trees. The next we stumbled out onto the road like we'd been spat out. Warren puked in the ditch and didn't stop shaking for hours. I filed an official report, but left out the worst parts. I said it was too dangerous to continue without proper equipment. I said we'd request a drone team. I said a lot of things that weren't true. The state called off the search a week later. Too risky, too remote. But 2 nights ago, I got a text. No number, no message, just a single photo. It showed the 5 hikers standing in that same clearing, smiling at the camera. Behind them, just visible between the trees, was something tall and wrong-shaped. And nailed to the post beside them was the same photo Warren took. Except in this version, he wasn't in it. I was the one who found Kara's cruiser. 3 days after she disappeared. 3 days of failed searches, false leads, and standing in front of her parents without anything useful to say. Kara Morris had been a deputy with us for 2 years, sharp, calm, reliable. One of those rare people you know would have made it out of anything if it were just up to her. The night she vanished, she was responding to a welfare check on Highway 12, a flat, dead stretch of road cutting through nothing but sunflower fields and old farmland. That section had been abandoned for years. No houses, no gas stations. Just a lot of overgrown fence posts and rotting signs. At 2:07 a.m., dispatch got a 911 call from an unregistered number. Open line. No voice. Just 40 seconds of faint wind and one sharp knock. That's all. Kara responded like it was routine. At 2:23 a.m., she radioed in from mile marker 88. Arrived at location. No vehicle. Checking the shoulder. Her tone was normal. Calm. Like it was any other night. That was the last we ever heard from her. We had deputies out there by 3 a.m. No cruiser. No sign of her. No footprints, drag marks, or sign of a struggle. Just silence. The GPS tracking from her vehicle stopped at the same moment her radio went dead. The official word was equipment malfunction, but that wasn't what it was. 3 days later, I got a call from a farmer named Leland Grant. He owned some land just past the ridge, about a mile from where Kara had gone missing. He sounded rattled. "There's a police car out here," he said. "Middle of my sunflower field. Engine's running." I got in my truck and drove straight there. The field was dead. Brown stalks, dry and broken, like they'd been drained instead of dried. The cruiser was parked dead center, lights off, no tracks leading in or out. No sign of how it got there. The grass around it was undisturbed, like it had just appeared there. The engine was humming. All the doors were locked. I had to smash the driver's side window to get in. Kara's things were still there. Her notebook, her sidearm, her half-finished coffee. Her seatbelt was buckled, like she'd just been sitting there. The clock on the dash said 2:37 a.m. Exactly 14 minutes after her last radio call. I had the cruiser towed and pulled the dash cam myself before anyone else could lay hands on it. I brought it back to the station, shut the blinds, and watched the footage alone. The video began with Kara driving in the dark. Silent highway. No cars. The dash radio whispered faint static from dispatch. You could hear the dull thrum of wind outside. At 2:23, she pulled over. Arrived at location, she said. No vehicle. I'll check the ditch. She left the cruiser. The camera kept recording. For about 5 minutes, it was just the empty front seat, softly lit by the glow of the dashboard. Then it glitched. A hard cut, like the camera was turned off and on again. Suddenly, Kara was back in the car. But she wasn't moving. She sat stiff in the driver's seat, staring into the camera. Her eyes were wide, unblinking. Her face looked pale. Her skin was damp, soaked, really, like she'd just come out of a lake. Her mouth hung slightly open, like she was about to say something, but didn't. I sat forward, frozen. She didn't move for 30 full seconds. Then her mouth widened, too wide, and she spoke. But it wasn't speech. The audio that came out was a mess of layered voices, a child crying, something mechanical grinding, and a low, distorted whisper, all mashed together, playing in reverse, like she was a speaker for something else. Then another cut. Now the screen was black. The camera still recorded for 3 more minutes. And under the darkness, through faint static, the audio looped a single phrase. "I'll be right back." Over and over. But it wasn't Kara's voice. It sounded like her, sure, but there was something off about it. Like someone had studied her closely, mimicked her tone, and layered it with something else. Something wrong. The last second of the video cut to static, and in that one frame, there was an image. A still shot. Kara standing in the middle of the sunflower field, smiling. But her face was distorted, her eyes just dark smudges, her smile too wide, too sharp. And behind her, barely visible in the shadowed stalks, were dozens of figures. Tall, still, watching. I showed no one the footage. I told the other deputies the cam was corrupted, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. About how it didn't look like a kidnapping or an ambush. It looked like she'd walked into something, or been pulled out of something we couldn't see. The next day, I examined the cruiser again. That's when I found the phone, tucked under the passenger seat. Not her department-issued cell. A cheap, old flip phone. No battery, no SIM. Just an SD card taped inside the back. I had the lab extract the data. One video, no timestamp. It starts with someone walking down a narrow path surrounded by sunflowers, grown unnaturally tall. The leaves brush against the lens, thick and dry. The path turns sharply. The camera pans. And there she is, Kara, standing with her back turned. She turns to the camera, smiles. Her mouth opens, but nothing comes out. Then from behind the camera, a whisper. "We found her." Cut to black. I requested assistance from state investigators. They showed up, watched the footage, said it was probably a staged hoax. Viral prank, one of them called it. They confiscated everything, the cruiser, the dashcam, the phone. But I know what I saw. That wasn't a prank. That was Kara, or something that had worn her like a jacket. A week passed. Then one night, at 2:37 a.m., same time her dash read when I found the car, the station phone rang. I was the only one there. I let it go to voicemail. When I played it back, the line was quiet for the first few seconds. Just faint static. Then a click. And a voice. Soft. Familiar. "I'm back now," it said. "Can you come outside?" The call came from Kara's badge number. One that had been deactivated the day after she disappeared. That night, I drove home past Highway 12. I shouldn't have. There, parked on the shoulder beneath the moonlight, I swear to God, was Kara's cruiser. Engine running. Driver's seat empty. And in the passenger seat, something was watching me. Just a shape. Then the lights blinked once. And the dash cam turned on. They call it Echo Canyon. Technically, it's Carter's Pass, according to the old forest maps, but nobody in town calls it that. For as long as I can remember, it's been Echo Canyon, a steep gulch tucked between two ridges about 30 miles outside the county line, overgrown and full of dead air. I was 12 years old the day my father disappeared there. He was a volunteer firefighter and took a call about a missing couple near the canyon. They'd been camping and hadn't returned. He never came back from that search. No body, no gear, not even a boot print. I remember how the town responded, with casseroles and whispers behind closed doors. My mom wouldn't speak his name after that. It was like he'd never existed. I became sheriff of Red Ash County 28 years later, and I never once stepped foot near the canyon. That changed 2 months ago when the first body turned up. A hiker from out of state, mid-30s, named Ryan Wilkes. Found by his brother after he failed to come back from a solo trip. He was curled in a fetal position on the canyon floor, eyes wide open, hands clamped over his ears so tightly his fingernails had broken off. Coroner ruled it a cardiac event, but that didn't explain the expression on his face, pure, wide-eyed terror. I wouldn't have thought much of it if it was just the one. But then there was a second, and a third, all within a 6-week window, all discovered in or near Echo Canyon. All with no signs of injury, just death by fright, like something had snapped inside them. I reviewed the autopsies. Identical causes. Extreme adrenaline spikes, as if they'd been hunted. But no bruising. No animal prints. Just a weird, subtle trauma to the inner ear canal in each case. Like they'd heard something they weren't supposed to. The state wanted to chalk it up to environmental exposure. Remote area, cold temperatures, disorientation. That kind of thing. But they weren't there the night I got the call from Cal Holloway. Cal's one of the local trail guides. Tough guy. Doesn't scare easy. But when his voice came through my radio just past midnight, it was shaking. He'd taken a group of tourists on a shortcut near the canyon when one of them broke off to relieve himself and never came back. They waited 15 minutes. Then they heard something. He said it sounded like someone screaming "help me" in 3 different voices at once. They left immediately. I told myself I wasn't going to get involved, that I'd let the rangers handle it. But something in my gut wouldn't let go. That canyon had taken my father, and now it was taking strangers, one by one. So I went, not with a team, just me. I told the deputy I was investigating a poaching lead. Didn't mention Echo Canyon by name. I drove the service trail as far as my truck would allow, then hiked the rest of the way with a flashlight, a sidearm, and a backup radio. The first odd thing I noticed was the sound, or the lack of it. Not quiet. Not the peaceful kind of silence you find in the woods. This was the kind of silence that presses against your eardrums, like the moment before a storm hits. The trees around the canyon were dead. Not fallen, just dry and still. No movement in the branches. No insects. Just a path carved down into black rock. The air grew colder the deeper I went. Not gradually. It was like stepping into a freezer. My breath fogged up, and frost began forming on my sleeves. The flashlight started flickering, but not because the battery was dying. It pulsed in rhythm, like a heartbeat. About 50 yards down, I heard the first sound. A whisper, directly in my left ear. "Don't leave me here." I froze. Shined the light in every direction. Nothing. Then came another. My legs are broken." This one from the right. The words were quiet, desperate, familiar, too familiar. I descended another 30 feet, and the path opened into a narrow ledge overlooking the basin floor. And that's when I heard it. My father's voice. "Son." I dropped the flashlight. It clattered down the rocks, spiraling into darkness. "Son," he repeated. Clear. Steady. The same voice I heard saying grace every night until the day he vanished. Then, don't let them take me. I don't know how long I stood there, my knees locked, my teeth chattering. Then I saw it, a shape at the edge of the canyon floor. Human, crouched, facing away, pale, like it hadn't seen sunlight in years. It didn't move like a person, more like a puppet someone forgot to string properly. And then, in the most broken, hollow version of my own voice, it said, "Sheriff." That thing knew me. It turned its head slowly, far too far, until it faced me directly. Its mouth moved, but the sound came from behind me. "You left him down here." I backed up the ledge, stumbling over loose stone, heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. "Come down," it said, in my father's voice again. "You owe us." I don't remember how I got out. I remember the flashlight dying, and the voice continuing, switching between my father, my mother, even my own. At one point, I swear I heard myself screaming from somewhere down below. I remember the trees looking different on the way out, rearranged, like the forest wanted to keep me lost. But eventually, I saw my truck again. The dome light was on, the door was open, and sitting on the seat was something I didn't bring with me. A tape recorder, one of the old kinds, covered in dust. I pressed play. It was my father. "Entering Gulch now," he said, voice muffled. No sign of camp. Visibility poor. Then silence. Then the sound of breathing. And then a voice, not his, whispering something I'll never forget. "We only echo what we're given." I burned that recorder that night. Closed the file. Told the state there was nothing to report. But I haven't slept since. Because sometimes, around 3 a.m., the radio in my office turns on by itself. And every so often, beneath the static, I hear my voice, calling for help, from somewhere deep underground.